Welcome, everyone, and we're starting another episode of Breaking Into Cybersecurity. I'm a little bit off my game today, but we will get this show rolling. So today we have Pete with us, and Pete comes from a different background. I wanted to bring in another recruiter so that we could talk about the ways that we hire both executive talent as well as other talent within this space and get more insights from them. So if you're listening to us live on LinkedIn, follow myself, follow Pete. If you're listening to us live on YouTube, hit that notification button, the subscribe button, and then the notification button down below. If you're following us on Twitch, ensure to follow us and submit your questions. We will try to answer what we can live and after the fact and have a good old show. So, Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you interested in cybersecurity.
Awesome. Well, I guess about 2014, I didn't even know what cybersecurity was. So I'm actually coming up on my 8-year anniversary in the field. It'll be July 14th. I started off as a tech recruiter for K-Force, working on like systems architects and developer roles and stuff like that. Then I got approached by the CEO of a former company that I had joined called Align. They're an IT audit shop. They did pen testing as well. And I was employee number 15 over there. Basically taught myself all the security terminology and taught myself the industry. And that's where I cut my teeth in security, helped them hire over 100 people in 2.5 years. Also stood up their HR department and campus recruiting program and developed an applicant tracking system from scratch and built a certification tracking system from scratch. So I got to be really intimately familiar with all the security certifications out there, at least in the audit GRC space. And then from there, went and started InfoSec hires. That was my first security recruiting firm. And now I'm on my second, InfoSec Connect. And we've been helping companies hire security people for so many years now, it seems like. So, yeah, that's my story.
Wow, that's quite interesting. When it comes to, we'll stick on the security side, but what are some of the interesting things you've learned about recruiting in security? Let's start there versus other niches.
Sure. Yeah. I found that security recruiting is completely different. And the generalist recruiters that don't understand the security field, they struggle because they don't understand a lot of the mindsets, a lot of the intangibles when it comes to recruiting security people. There's a fundamental difference between hiring a security engineer and an accountant. So I think a lot of the issues we see with recruiting and security is the recruiters are generalists and not specialists. So that's why I think it helps to have people like me that really, and Joe Hudson, I'm sure you guys have had on, that really understand the security industry intimately and can help guide people and help hiring managers adjust expectations when needed and stuff like that. So I would say there's a few things like there's an element of ego, I think, for especially people that have been in the security field for a number of years. There's also just the fact that there's such a shortage of the experienced folks that the demand is so high that you end up having people that get a little bit full of themselves because everybody wants to hire them. And I've found that, especially for security roles, hiring managers have a very narrow set of expectations as far as what that ideal candidate might look like, even more so than in tech, for instance. And it seems like there's a lot more intangibles in security hiring than there would be in tech. Like if you're hiring a developer, they have to know X, Y, and Z language and X, Y, and Z framework, and it's pretty straightforward. In security, there's so many deep specialties, but then you have people that are generalists, and a lot of times hiring managers are looking for all of that in the same person. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm.
Interesting. Well, welcome, Renee Small, our other super recruiter here on the show.
Hello.
Pete, you were just mentioning some of the expectations that you have to help reset for hiring managers. What are some of the common expectations that you will have to help hiring managers understand and help them reset when they're recruiting for security talent?
Well, I think it It depends on the company, obviously, but there's a few common themes that we see pretty often. The job descriptions tend to be just too needy overall. They maybe grew their own talent, and that person was there for a few years, and so they accumulated a bunch of different responsibilities that doesn't exist in any person outside of the organization. So that happens pretty often. A lot of times we'll have interview processes that'll last 5, 6 rounds, maybe with an assignment thrown in there. And when people are having 4 or 5 offers thrown at them all at once, it's kind of hard to land the best people if they have that many options. In my experience, people usually take the path of least resistance. As long as that's a good job and a good offer, they're going to go that route versus jumping through a bunch of hoops. So that's certainly something I've seen.
That definitely makes sense. And shout out to some of our live audiences. Hi, Mariello, live team from Atlanta, Georgia. Then we have Bernard from Virginia, and Marcelio is saying hi. Um, in regards to taking the path of least resistance for candidates, do you feel that there's really a shortage of candidates, or are, like you mentioned, the expectations too high, too specific? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I forgot to mention too, there's a lot of we only want to hire somebody from a direct competitor doing this exact job today, and that's another problem. Don't get me started on. But um, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So is there really a shortage of cybersecurity people, or is it just a misalignment of expectations, like you were talking about, or poaching, where you're trying to only hire from a limited talent pool, and therefore you have an artificial shortage versus a true shortage where you just don't have enough people in the workforce in general?
Yeah, a little of column A, little of column B for sure. I've actually graphed this. I wish I could throw it up on the screen, but I call it the talent bottleneck, where essentially you have thousands upon thousands of people trying to break into the industry, and they're struggling because there just aren't enough entry level jobs. But then you have a shortage at the mid to senior individual contributor level, and that's really where the shortage is. But if we don't start hiring people into those entry level roles and training them up in 5, 10 years, when a lot more of the boomers and Gen X retire, the shortages are going to get so much worse. So I'm not sure what the solution is to that, but I know we have to start addressing it. Um, so yeah, the shortage really is at the mid to senior individual contributor level. I think we have enough executives. I think we have enough management. And we certainly have enough entry level folks to meet the current demand. But like I said, we got to open up more entry level jobs.
Renee, looks like you had something to say.
Oh yeah, I mean, I sound like I'm repeat. He sounds like a carbon copy of what? Do they still say carbon copy? What is it? Broken record? Like what I say all the time. So, um,
Carbon copy.
he,
Who uses paper to make carbon copies? Sorry.
right, exactly, exactly. And so, have you heard from leaders? I can imagine that you interact with, all a lot of them in this. In your work, in your current work. So I'm curious about if has anyone made, I mean, we all are making the observation. We know we have a ton of people in entry. We have a decent amount of people at the executive levels, but that mid-career piece is the part where the struggle is coming in. Have you heard from leaders and what their, recommendations are, or any kind of, I feel like there's this we hear a lot about the challenge. We hear a lot about, you know, people trying to get in, and the struggles there. But the mid management obviously is the part, and the senior, like the tech leads, the senior level or experienced hires are the ones that we really need. Have you heard anything from managers or leaders, really the executives, in terms of what they think the solution is for that?
I have this. I think what is the solution? I haven't really heard any other folks talking about solutions. Again, like you said, everybody's identifying the problem. That's not an issue, um, but we definitely need more solutions. I personally think what we need is more MSSPs because they can get their investment back after they've trained somebody, because those people are profit generating versus cost centers with most security teams. I think the onus is on MSSPs to train and grow their own. I've personally evangelized with my MSSP clients to do that. A lot of times we get pushback though. The response to that is usually, well, what happens if we train a bunch of people and then they leave in a year because they have so many options now? So that's the main rebuttal, I think, to that argument and that idea of training folks at the entry level. But we got to figure it out somehow. I don't know if it's government regulation that could solve this issue. I almost feel like we have to somehow engineer a market force that encourages the MSSPs to train people, and the security consulting firms and the CPA firms. I work with a lot of consulting firms, and that's one way that I advise people to break into the industry is go work for an MSSP or a consulting firm, because they'll get their investment back on you. So they're more likely to hire you at the entry level. And there's a lot of campus recruiting programs and stuff like that with the Big Four and the smaller firms and stuff like that. I think that's really where we have to go. If, say a hiring manager at Visa is hiring a security engineer and they have limited budget and they can't hire two people, they can't hire somebody entry level. They have a knowledge gap that they need to fill, and there's just no way for them to justify hiring an entry level person. They don't have anybody to train that person. They don't have room to hire two people. So what do you do? So that's why I think the only thing that makes sense is to have the companies that can make their money back on training folks do that. How we push them into doing that, I'm not sure. I've been trying to do it little by little and one connection at a time, as my tagline says, encouraging hiring managers to do that. So
I think a great way to do that is what we've been talking about, the apprenticeship approach, where you're even subsidizing their entry level folks because you're still in college. They don't have as many offers as those that are college graduates and might be out there. So you're doing that on the job training, getting the certs, and at a reduced cost, and that allows them to get more, train more at a lower cost. And the Department of Commerce helps do a lot of those. Department of Labor, sorry, helps do a lot of those. But I know people don't like taking the government money for all the strings that comes attached. But they could always do it themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the big challenge for anybody is that it's a huge time investment to sink into a candidate that if you don't know if they're going to stick around for longer than 6 months once they get that experience. So I think to combat a lot of that, you have to figure out a way to keep people once you've invested in training them. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. And I think that's an often overlooked piece of all of this, is that companies aren't focusing enough on retaining people, and they're reactive in their hiring versus proactive in succession planning. I listened to one of your guys' episodes where you had an executive on, and he was talking about how he basically manages to hire all entry level people because he's training the higher ups to move into their boss's position when they get promoted or leave, and then basically goes on down the line promoting people until he has an entry level opening. That was an awesome technique. I wish every company would do that. That's a really, really good idea. But yeah, finding a way to justify training people, I think, is the hardest piece. And a good way to do that is ensure that you're keeping people. So, really emphasizing benefits, being flexible. That's the big thing that everybody can do, and it's cheap. It's just give people flexible work arrangements, or remote work doesn't cost you anything to do that, and everybody wants it anyway. Recognition programs, again, that can be just a free thing that you're recognizing people for their work, but that has a great impact on employee retention and satisfaction. So those are just a few ideas, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the comments we have Companies like NCC Group have internship programs where they aim to hire people with experience in different pen testing, internal training on board, and under the supervision of other programs. Yeah, we mentioned that a lot of consulting companies do that. Definitely a plug there for one, but many of the consulting companies do that. So if you are getting into this space, definitely consider them. Another comment was consider offering incentives for employees to get to higher level certifications and staying. I know some of the companies that I've worked for, they have long-term incentive structures where if you stay for X number of years, you'll receive a bonus, or your 401k vests, or things like that, that would incentivize longevity and retention.
And a great thing about that too is you can write it into, you can have the employees sign an agreement that basically says, if you get the certification and then leave in 3 months, then you'll have to pay it back. So, that can be a further retention tool, as well as ensuring that the company's not taking a bath on the cost of that, $5,000 SAN certification. I'm not a big fan of golden handcuffs in general. I think that's kind of a toxic practice, but that's one, I guess, tangible solution.
And the thing is, you will employees, if the work culture is not the right fit, or if it's toxic or whatever, they'll get some other company to pay that back when it comes to the incentive compensation.
Mhm.
I mean, unless it's a huge amount of money. Like, I know of some folks that have gotten $100,000 retention bonuses, $50,000 retention bonuses now. That's
Yep,
a
me
different
too.
ball game. Um, so yeah, you're gonna stay for that, for that year, for that 6 months or whatever. But I think, Pete, something you brought up, and someone else in the comments, I think someone said, were you the one that said pay for certifications? Oh, I
Yeah,
think Ron in the comments said pay for certifications.
Pete said it as well. Yeah.
And Pete said it as well. And the definitely paying for certifications is huge, because a lot of certifications and training, just like training overall. So I don't want to tie it to certs, but just overall training and growth in terms of learning. If companies just did that one thing, they'd probably be able to retain so many more of their employees. Because when they get on the phone with me and I'm talking to them about why they're looking to leave, and you can see this in a dozen various surveys that have been done, most people, it's about the growth opportunity. It's about the lack of training. They feel like they're stagnant. They feel like they're not at the cutting edge, or getting to the cutting, or learning new things. So you're feeling stagnant, which you can't be in security because everything moves so quickly, and I think leaders, if they put in their budget a certain amount of money for this training and development overall, that in and of itself would just have the people who would be on staff would be more likely to stay if they had, if they knew that they can continuously learn every year, so without the certification component. So I just want to add that in as
I would
well.
just say too, as far as retention, like when I was at Align, I was their HR guy too. So I did quarterly check-ins with people. Something so small like that, either be it HR, the hiring manager, if you have like a formal sit down with your employees every quarter and really get a feel on the pulse of how the team is feeling, you'll suss out any potential toxicity that's brewing, or discontentment, and it's important to catch that early before it festers and gets worse, and then all of a sudden you lose your whole team. Um, so I think even just listening to people is such a big deal. A lot of people don't feel heard. They feel that they're stagnating because their manager doesn't care, and people leave their bosses, as they say. So yeah, sorry, just wanted to add
No,
on.
no,
No, that's a perfect
definitely.
point.
I think like I was recommended a book recently, and we have some viewers that love when we recommend books, but I did a review on the new 1 Minute Manager, which it's helpful to highlight the new part because it changed from the old 1 minute manager. And it gives some quick ways that managers can check in, advise, and manage their folks that everyone thinks is so hard, but it gives them some quick actionable tips. And that's something that they checking in for a minute every once in a while. Like that's all that they need to see that they're being seen and valued.
Yeah, or if things are tough right now for whatever reason, one of the things when I worked at K-Force, we had a manager that was awesome. Even when we were struggling as a team and hated our jobs, he was there with us, kind of in the trenches and making us feel like we were a cohesive unit. So a lot of those intangible sort of emotional intelligence things, I think, make people feel heard and like they actually matter. So there's a lot of people I talk to, they feel like just a number. And if you feel like a number and you're disposable, especially in this environment with all the layoffs, um, having that daily or weekly or monthly, whatever interaction with your hiring manager can really keep you happy, I think.
Yeah.
Here's a question from one of our audience members. First, since you did both IT and security folks, what are some of the suggestions you would have for them to transition in when they already have potentially 5 to 6 years of experience?
Yeah, there's a lot of people in that situation and people that are struggling. And I think a lot of people struggle because they're approaching the job search the wrong way. So, if you're going out there and applying to 200 positions and they're all one click apply and each position has 150 applicants, good chance that's not going to go anywhere. So I actually have a methodology that I advise people to target hiring managers directly on LinkedIn. I guess I can kind of lay it out here. So first thing I would say is make sure that your LinkedIn profile and your resume have some good security terms in there. To get past a recruiter, it's all about keywords. So using those security terms, if you went and got your Security Plus, or if you're doing identity and access management, Active Directory, stuff like that, you can really put your security terms in your resume. And then once you have that, you want to reach out to hiring managers on LinkedIn. So if you see a job posting that looks interesting, instead of just applying to the job, go to the company that has the job, their LinkedIn page. Once you're there, you click on employees. It'll be a hyperlink that'll list every single employee working at that company. You can filter by location. And then once you have that, you can type in what you think the hiring manager's job title might be. So say it's a security engineer role. That hiring manager would probably be director of security engineering, manager of security engineering, director of security operations, security operations manager. Could be anything like that. You can try a few different options, and you should be able to find that hiring manager just by doing that. And once you do, you think you found the person, send them a connection request. You have like 200 characters. Say, hey, I noticed you had I was doing some OSINT. I noticed you had a position open for X, Y, and Z. Here's why I'm interested. Here's why I think I'm a good fit, and just send them a connection request. And I've had a lot of people find success with that beyond just applying to jobs online. And then another tip I would say, join all of the Discord channels out there. There's a million of them. If you go to accesscyber.org/resources, they have a whole list of Discord channels. So there's one for DFIR, there's one for offensive security. There's a bunch of them out there. Wild West Hack and Fest, BHIS, Black Hills Information Security, has a Discord. And then you can ask your LinkedIn network if they have some good Discord channels for you as well. And there you can network with people in the security field already. You can ask hiring managers questions. Most of them have mentorship sections in their channels, and then you can view job postings on there as well.
Perfect. Share that link in the chat, and I'll share that out with everyone. We have about time for one more question, but before that, let's highlight some comments. Renee, hope all is well. Thank you for hosting this useful and timely event. We do this every Thursday at 1 p.m. live.
Every Thursday.
And then Renee posting back. Happy to see them. Hey,
For
Pete.
once, I don't have to run the whole thing, so I can post back. I can say hi. This is great. I'm gonna
Hey,
have
Pete.
Chris run this show going forward.
No problem.
Oh my
Hey,
gosh.
Pete, for someone trying to break into the IT space, is GRC recommended? If yes, do you have an ideal path, such as training or required knowledge?
There's the barriers to entry to GRC. I think in general are a lot lower than like security operations. So I think even people that are trying to break into working in a SOC, GRC would be a good place to start, just because the barriers to entry are lower, and there's a lot of consulting firms that will train people in the GRC space. So like I said, there's a ton of them with campus recruiting programs. The Big Four, Align's got a big one now. Shellman's doing a campus recruiting and training program. It's a good place to start. I would say, depending on what your background is, my advice would change. So I don't know if you have an IT background already, or what your current status is. That would be helpful.
Yeah,
Well,
they
he said that
mentioned they
he's
had IT background.
no, he said he's trying to break into the IT space. So he may not have
Yeah.
he may not have an IT background. And Pete, I also want to add in because I know you talk a lot about the campus recruitment efforts, which I think are fantastic, and I agree with you. I've been a campus recruiter, like been literally on campuses, have done that, not in security, but have done it, and have been a recipient. Like that's how I got my first internship, and my first job was through campus recruitment efforts. So it's definitely useful, but the challenge sometimes is for people who are not, we tend to get people who are also mid-career, who are making that transition, as well as so we have the early career, so people with zero experience then and are in college, and then we have some folks that are like going to school while they're working. So that may, as much as that may be helpful for them too, we always try to think about the folks who are transitioning, who are already in the job, so they may be making 100 grand, whatever, they're like seasoned in their role and trying to make their transition. So
Or
I
out
would
of the
also ask
military.
military folks, things like that, like for folks that are not going through that, going up that path. So I don't know, when you were in your HR role, seeing people coming in from that way, like sideways, if you have any recommendations for them too, because we tend to get a combination of those three elements trying to break into security.
Gotcha. Yeah, when I was running the campus recruiting program, we actually got second career, mid career folks as well that would come through the program. We just called it campus recruiting program, but basically anybody who needed to be trained in any way would come through that same program, and they would do like a 2-week intensive training course when they first came on board, do the initial onboarding, and then a basic primer on IT audit. So a lot of the IT audit firms specifically are doing that, even for mid-career folks. Um, if you already have a background in a successful career in another field, the hardest part is by far going to be the salary expectation adjustment. Um, it's so tough to want to take a sizable pay cut in a lot of cases. There are some fields where if you have transferable skills, specific subsets of security, you're more likely to get the salary that you're accustomed to. So, for instance, I talk to a lot of folks that are in law enforcement, and they have a host-based forensics background, and they end up transitioning into DFIR in the breach response, or into like insider threat, that type of thing, and they're able to secure similar salaries. It just kind of depends on what your background is. So entry level salaries in GRC, they're usually around 60,000. It may have gone up in the last few years. I would say probably 60 to 80,000, anywhere in there. If there's any way you can make one of those salaries work just to break into the field, once you have a year of experience, the world is your oyster, basically. So, um, try to, I would say in general, have a focus on the long term. Now, obviously understand that, if you have bills to pay, there's only so much you can do about that. But just understand that like in the long run, it may pay off to take a slight pay cut.
Perfect. Well, I always like to ask one last question of our of our guests, sorry, and that is if you had one piece of sage advice for someone watching this show in the future that was looking to break into the industry, what would that be?
Get as involved on LinkedIn as you possibly can. So a lot of folks watching this, they probably already are, but connect with me and Renee and my buddy Joe Hudson, Chris Rides over at Tyro Security, all good people, all very well connected in the security space. Naomi Buckwalter, engage with her content, and you'll see a lot of potential hiring managers seeing your comments and shares and stuff like that. Just be as active as you can and be as positive as you can. Stay away from the taboo topics, especially when you're trying to break into the industry. I know it's a lot of comments in one, but there you go.
Well, I really
Great
appreciate
advice.
it. Thank you, everyone,
Great
for
advice.
tuning in to CISO Thursdays with Breaking Into Cybersecurity. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe and notification button. And then for those of you listening after the fact on podcast, give us a 10-star review on your podcast platform, 5 if possible, and then share with as many friends and family. Thank you, everyone, and have a great Thursday.
Thanks.